Part-time coach versus full-time coach. Is it possible to build a thriving coaching practice part-time alongside a busy life, busy career, busy job? That is the question I'm going to answer for you today. Welcome back to the Coach Business School podcast. My name is Andy Ramage. I'll be your coach, your trainer, your guide on this reflection into all things coaching. And just a reminder, if you're new to coaching and thinking about becoming an accredited coach, go to coachbusiness.school where you can come and train with me on my treble accredited coaching diploma. Equally, if you're already an accredited coach and you want to master the skills of business and marketing, whether you've got no clients and you're just building up or you've got hundreds of them, my Coach MBA is the course for you. Once again, go to coachbusiness.school to find out more. Okay, today's conversation. Let's get into it. Can we become really successful as a part-time coach alongside a busy career, or do we need to burn our bridges and go all in full-time to become successful? This is a really important question and one I've reflected upon a lot, and it's in my own story. There is some pervading wisdom that you need to go all in if you're, starting on a new venture or opportunity, such as coaching. You need to burn your bridges. What I mean by that is you need to quit your existing career and start a new coaching career. You effectively burn your bridges so there's no retreat effectively. Therefore, you have to make it work. I get it. That sounds much better on paper than it is in practice, because I think what happens is, my personal reflection and why I didn't do it, is that when you burn your bridges, i.e. let's just say you quit and go all in, sometimes that puts you under a bit too much pressure to get coaching to work really quickly. And in doing so, I think can bring a different type of energy to it. That being said, I know lots of coaches that have come through our training that have gone all in full-time from the start and made a great success of it. So this is just my personal reflection. I'm just trying to give you both sides of the story. My side of the story is the opposite side, in the sense that I nurtured and grew all my coaching businesses part-time. So it's nice to have both sides of the story, and then whatever you choose feels right for you, because sometimes a redundancy comes along that actually makes it brilliant timing to take a redundancy and give yourself a nice run up at coaching. Or it could be that you just cannot stand a toxic career and you need to make a change. And these type of motivators might put you in a position where you want to go all in full-time with coaching from the start. Equally, I would argue many of the coaches that train with us, and the majority, are in full-time, busy lives, busy careers. So really it's to that group that I want to talk to today more predominantly, and really start by sharing my story. 14 years ago when I got into this, I had no intention of becoming a coach. What I did with my coaching was just embrace the tools, the techniques, the learning, the knowledge to coach myself. And it was the greatest gift I ever gave my career. And with that knowledge, then I trained all my teams. And it was one of the greatest gifts they were given to their careers, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. I had all this new learning that I was able to pass on to other people who started to perform better across the board. And we grew one of our businesses 7 times bigger in half the time. That was in commodities broking. So I just want to start there when it comes to the time conundrum, especially if you're sitting there thinking, I might be interested in coaching, but will I have the time, or how am I going to utilize it when I've got this busy, big career that I can't really step away from financially? I'm going to get to that in a moment. But before I do, just to put a real underline under something really important, the greatest gift you will give your career, in my opinion, is to become a coach or train as a coach. It just is, because the tools and techniques you learn will help you multiply and magnify whatever it is you do in life in a better way, whether that's to parent or whether that's to CEO a big business. You will become better at those roles because of the tools and techniques that you pick up from coaching. So if we begin there, you can't lose. None of us can lose. It's the greatest gift we're going to give ourselves in our personal lives and in our careers, is training as a coach. Forget the part-time, full-time conundrum, and let's just begin there. Ultimately, it's a win-win-win. Now, let's get into the part-time, full-time conundrum. My story was that as I developed these skills part-time alongside a really super busy career, and it wasn't that I had sort of an average job that I could just turn up to and dive out early from. I couldn't. It was a big commodities brokerage. I run it. I co-founded it. I was a broker on the desk and also pretty much managed the whole group. So it was a super busy full-time career is what I'm trying to get across. That was long hours as well. So if you looked at, most people in terms of spare time, I had minimal. But equally, I fell in love with coaching. But I was also caught in those crosshairs of something that I think lots of people get caught in, especially when it comes to coaching at the start, that my wife and I, Tara, we decided many moons prior to that I was going to go out into the world and try and generate income for our family, and Tara was going to stay at home and be there for our children. I know not everyone has that setup, but that was the setup that felt right for us. And I'm so delighted and privileged and proud and grateful that we were able to do that for our children. I know many people are not in a position to do that. It so happened that we were. So that was our setup. So that put even more pressure in some ways upon me having this dream of stepping into coaching, because all the economics were driven through my existing career. I didn't have anything to offset that with, i.e. through Tara's career. So I couldn't just burn those bridges and quit and just on a whim follow this coaching dream that I'd now fallen in love with. But a few things had happened that I think is important to get across to you. My existing career, which commodities broking, was brilliant at generating income, but it was somewhat devoid of meaning. There was more and more reflections of mine to think, what am I doing? It felt a little bit like I was giving all of this life force, this energy, and I really was, really diligent and really hardworking, like most of you are, but it wasn't really going into anything that meaningful outside of generating income. It just felt, something didn't feel right for me. We're all completely different, but that's my story. It just didn't feel right for me. I thought, I've got all this energy. I've got all this impetus to try and do things in the world. And I can't express that through that career. Maybe I can express that through another career. And I stumbled into coaching and I fell in love with this concept of giving back, contribution, adding value to people's lives. That for me was the greatest buzz that I'd ever really experienced up until that point. And something important happened. It actually gave me more time in my existing career because that hole in my soul was being filled round the edges part-time through coaching. So that's an important thing to get across. Sometimes we're desperate to get out of our careers into something more meaningful, but actually by building coaching alongside our existing career, it can provide the meaning that you seek, which might allow you to be even more skillful and stay in your existing role longer. So then you've got either double the economics because you've got part-time coaching going on, or it can just buy you the time and the space to get your coaching practice to work. Again, we're all wonderfully different. I'm just sharing my story of what can be done. And again, as someone that generated decent income through their career and our family was completely reliant on that income, for me, I had to be really skillful with this, the step into coaching. So I'm starting to build up that meaning and purpose through coaching. I'm starting to build a little bit of momentum in terms of a coaching practice. And it started really gently. I didn't rush into it. There wasn't that pressure of this has to work instantly and it has to fill X amount of gap in terms of our economics or I'm out. And I think sometimes people go too hard, too fast, and they bail out and they miss the opportunities where if they'd been a little bit more skillful and maybe stayed in an existing career longer, they'd have had more time. Again, caveats, there's exceptions, and some people want to go all in from the start and still make it super successful. Just sharing my story, my approach. So for me, I had to take my time with it and really feel it out and find out what I wanted to get from coaching, who I wanted to coach, who was the people that I most wanted to serve. And that took me a few years to get there. Anyone that's trained with me will know this. I was coaching, just enough to keep my toe in it for 2 or 3 years. The odd client here, the odd client there, very much word of mouth, didn't do social media or any of those things at that point, just really word of mouth. Just executive style coaching for people in my kind of industry, broking and I guess business, for want of a better word. But that was enough to keep me in the game. I'd start to build some momentum around it and also have an opportunity, and I've discussed this in previous podcasts, to start to step the value up in terms of the economics that I was making from coaching. So that hourly rate, not that we ever charge by an hour. I have a big beef against that. Make sure to check out previous podcasts as well to unlock that. We charge by the package. the outcome that it is that we offer is where all the value is, not an hourly rate. But I didn't know that at the time, right? Because I was new to this. So it was an hourly rate. But that hourly rate started to stepping stone up from £25 to 50 to 100 to 200 to 250. I think I got it probably to about £300 or so. In those early-ish stages of those first few years, just playing around with coaching in that executive space, doing it all wrong. Not necessarily so much in terms of my coaching, but the marketing and business side of it, I didn't really understand, had to figure that out over time. Hence why now I train coaches specifically on that, because I've got sort of 14 years of it, so I understand how it all works now. But this is my story, right? So that started to unfold part-time, and I loved it. I've got to own the fact that I loved it. Like, here I was in this job, generating lots of income to the left, but actually those moments when the first client paid me £25 an hour for coaching felt like it was just incredible. The joy of thinking, this new skill that I've got that is really adding value in the world is clearly adding value to someone else, that they're willing to invest their hard-earned money in me helping them. And as mentioned, over time, that started to step in stone higher, because the value that people placed on the work that we were doing together in certain different arenas had a higher value for the same type of outcomes. Again, I cover this in previous podcasts. Now, why this is important to get this across is that it was giving me the time to drill the skills of coaching, to figure out who and how I wanted to coach. It also gave me a look at the potential economical potentials for what we were doing, which will start to give me some more insight around maybe at a later date I could transition from my broking career into coaching full time without burning the bridges and putting myself under too much pressure. Now, within that, then I started to carve out time that I didn't have before because of the coach training. I did a lot of work around identifying what was essential to me and what was trivial. Brilliant book called Essentialism by Greg McGowan that you might want to check out. Absolutely love that book. But essentially, the concept is that you figure out what's most important to you. And coaching essentially does lots of this brilliant work. I was doing lots of work around values, and I was really getting aligned with what was most important to me. I started to figure out that there was a lot of trivial things in my life that were draining lots of time. Everyone's story is different. One of those big time drains in my life, personally, was alcohol. It was a big part of what we did as brokers, but it would take my time in the process of drinking. But the next day and the day after that and the day after that, I just felt like I had no time. So I wanted to optimize everything in my life. And again, this absolutely doesn't have to be your story, but it is mine. And one of the things that I did to create more time in my life was to take a break from alcohol, which gave me tons of time. Personally, everyone's different, but it gave me lots of time. It gave me my mornings back, that I was able to devote an hour, which actually in the end became 2 hours a day, before the working day began. And I really believe this. You can change the world in an hour a day, 2 hours a day. You really can. You can certainly change your world in an hour or two a day. And for me, that's what I needed. I needed that to study, to read, to develop, to think, to grow, to learn, to reflect upon how I wanted to use this brilliant skill. So I had 2 hours a day in the end that I could devote effectively to coaching. Drilling the skills, learning, thinking, reflecting. And in that space, started to figure out how I wanted to coach, how I wanted to show up as a coach. I started to learn a lot more about marketing and business, running a coaching business and practice. I was able to experiment, try new things, make loads of mistakes in the safety net of a full-time career. And over time, I was able to become much more courageous in my existing career. This is a really important transition point, I think, that all coaches get to that start part-time, is that you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see that there's economical potential as your experience builds to potentially do this full-time. That's a really important junction point, I think, to reach as a coach. And some people get there straight away. Some people take out diplomas and within 3 months are generating full-time style income. That's not the case for everyone, but that certainly is for some. Whereas for me, I didn't even know if I wanted to be a coach. I was just playing around with this thing for those first few years. But then I started to see the potential in it. And actually my brain started to shift and think, wow, maybe there's an opportunity to escape the golden handcuffs of this big city career that I created, which I never thought was going to be possible, by the way. But I could see suddenly a glimpse of, oh, maybe I could go full time on this and devote all my energy and all my effort, and maybe over time could offset some of that, offset the difference between what I was currently generating and what I might generate. So that's a massive, massive moment, I think, in a coaching career when you can see its potential. And I think doing it part-time versus full-time early on gives you a chance to figure these things out, because there also is some readjusting and rebalancing of how you want to show up and who you want to coach. And you can make some mistakes, as mentioned, and start to figure this thing out, as I did, which then gave me this glimpse of the potential of coaching, which for me was exhilarating. It was like, wow, imagine if I could do this full-time. Imagine if I could coach from anywhere in the world and have total freedom, have no bosses or massive responsibilities of this big organization, and just create something that worked for me, that allowed me the freedom to travel, to learn, to grow, to share, but also covered off the bills and allowed us still to have nice things, right? Because I like nice things. Who doesn't? And that was all becoming possible because I think I was more relaxed through that process. I wasn't under too much pressure to get it to work. I could experiment. I could try new things, again, in the safety net of a busy career. Now, combined with that was experiencing more meaning and purpose in my life, which was such a gift. Combined with that was starting to coach myself more and more to be more optimal in the way that I thought, as well as the way that I moved my body. Everything started to change. So I started to carve out even more time in my life as I became more aligned with my values. I spent more time with my lovely wife and my kids, less time hanging out in the pub for a couple of drinks after work. It gave me even more time back. So then I started to carve out some time to coach lunch times and after work. Again, I didn't overload myself because I knew I had a busy career and all those things that we have, but I just needed to test the system. Could I get this to work? And it was starting to work. But then something else interesting and exciting starts to happen. You meet that lovely junction point where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And as mentioned, my brain started to light up and think, wow, if I can get this to work full time, maybe I could escape the big city career, and off we go. So what that allows you to do then is become more courageous in your existing career. Again, this is another important point. For example, in my career, there was a junction point where it was like, I want to devote more time to coaching. So I'm going to see if I can go down to 4 days a week effectively and have an extra day then full time, full power in coaching. Now, everyone said that was impossible. No one does that in my world, in the broking world. No, you don't have part-time brokers. That's not how it works. Until I did it. And I say that in a way that is really empowered, that we didn't know anyone in the industry that had ever done that until I came along and said, well, that's what I want to do. And the sort of powers that be that sat around our broking franchise went, fine, off you go. Brilliant. Tick. Now I had an extra day, full day to devote to coaching. And obviously that was already generating some income. So even if there was a slight loss of income as I went down to 4 days a week, because in broking you effectively get what you generate, I was able to rebalance that slightly through this day of coaching. Now, with that confidence and courage, then, as you start to devote a bit more time to it, you become more courageous. So then I was able to move the goalposts again and go down to 3 days a week, but also then devote my mental real estate more towards coaching and away from that traditional business, because I felt safe in the knowledge that if I got that tap on the shoulder at some point and said, come on, Andy, we need you back in the game over here in terms of that commodities business, I'd be almost in a position to say, do you know what, I think I'm going to go and do something a little bit different with my life, which allowed me to be more courageous, right? Which allowed me to stay in that career a bit longer, because now I'd still devoted quite a lot of mental real estate over here to growing this coaching organizations and businesses and initiatives, and still experimenting in the safety net of that income and that existing career, all the while more and more energy, more and more impetus and effort around coaching. And that started to broaden out from starting online challenges to one-to-one coaching, to small group coaching, to also a bit of executive coaching around the edges. I then doubled back, obviously coaching my own teams, and eventually built a whole system that I brought back into my existing career. I'll get to that a bit later as well, which was building more and more momentum. And bear in mind now, I'm almost about 6 or 7 years into coaching. So I've got 6 or 7 years, good years of coaching experience, building and building and building and building to such a point that it was like, do you know what? I think I'm ready to do this. I think I'm ready to go full time as a coach and create coaching initiatives, ideas, devote my life force, my energy, my full time to coaching. In my eyes, skillfully done in a way that never put my family under too much financial pressure, because a lot of it was built around the edges. And also, I really enjoyed that period, being able to run both at the same time. I'd optimized so much of my life to give me that time back that I was really feeling this sense of calling to more meaning and purpose and courage. Courage to make that huge decision to walk away from that big career and those golden handcuffs to go full time for coaching. Now that does take courage, because, to step out of one arena into another, there's always fear baked around that. But equally, when you've been playing with it part-time, there's much less fear, because it's not a complete unknown. You're already in that game. It's just a case of magnifying it out slightly with that extra time to create that extra economics. So as I did so and stepped into that new arena, it was just the greatest gift of my life. I'm going to own every single moment of that. It just was the freedom, the sense of purpose, the sense of meaning, that sense of courage to show up and shine a new message every single day, to become entrepreneurial and actually create businesses that do good in the world through coaching. That life force, that energy of mine, really devoted to something meaningful and purposeful, a life of contribution, a life of freedom, a life of love, a life of purpose. What an absolute gift and a joy. And I think when it comes to the time conundrum, people don't give themselves enough time to figure these things out. It's like, I want it all to happen tomorrow. I want to quit my job and start this huge coaching franchise tomorrow, full time. Maybe that will happen, and I've seen people do that. But for lots of people, it won't. It puts you under too much pressure. But if you give yourself a longer run up and ramp, you can create that meaning and purpose around the edges, try new things in the safety net of an existing career, become more courageous in your existing career to maybe carve out more time. And then eventually at some point, you've still got to take that big leap. But it's much more skillful, in my opinion, than burning your bridges, going all in too early on, and then you put yourself under too much pressure. And fast forward from there, another 6 years or so, here I am, still getting to do that thing that I love every single day with meaning and purpose. I'm a massive coach, first and foremost. Yes, I do lots around training coaches and training coaches to be successful in business. But ultimately, who am I? What am I? I'm a coach. I still do the thing that I love, and I do a lot of it, and I absolutely love it. It's given me this life of contribution, of freedom, of love and joy and connection, my lovely family. I get to learn, grow, develop, and add value to people's lives. And it is growing all the time. Yes, I'm now 12, 13 years into this, but imagine you could get to that place after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Would you be willing to put in the effort to get to that? I would say most people, if they see it like that, of course you would. If you could transition out of your career into another really meaningful, purposeful, economical career, if you give yourself a bit more time, what an absolute gift. So if you're putting this off thinking, I can't quite get there because I don't have the time, and how am I ever going to manage this alongside a busy career? I'm a living, breathing example of someone that's done that, hopefully skillfully over time, and has put myself in this beautiful position now where I get to do what I love on a daily basis that adds value to people's lives. So part-time, full-time. For me, depends on your individual circumstance. But if you're in a busy career, I would go part-time and then step into full-time. And here's another really important part to that conundrum. And I cover this off in previous podcasts. But equally, when you've got an existing career, for example, I would say that's the number one place to begin with your coaching. And you might do that whilst you're still in that career. Put your hand up, go and have the conversations with the CEO, the HR directors. This is the skill that I've got. This is the value that I can add. These are the problems I see in the business. I can solve these problems through coaching. Have that conversation. It might be they already have coaches that they might bring you in as part of your role to do some coaching, gaining massive experience. And then when you've got all that experience, you might take it out of the company and bring it back in on a contractual basis. That's effectively what I've done. Most of my best coaching in terms of the meaning, purpose, and economics is now coaching in those old careers. So I'm no longer in those careers, such as commodities broking, but I coach in those arenas. I'm no longer a professional footballer, but I coach professional footballers in transitioning their careers. This is the ultimate skill. So I would advise, whilst you're in your existing career and you're doing this part-time approach, start to have those conversations within your existing career. You might open up a whole new world of opportunity within your existing career. It might get you having conversations with people you'd never normally have conversations with. It might mean that you can reshape your existing career, so you stay in your existing career, but you do more coaching than you do the actual job itself. It might give you so many insights, tools and techniques and understandings of the problems that your type of business has and the solutions you can provide through coaching, that you create a consultancy, come out of that business and just consult back into that business or similar businesses that look like that business. These are the opportunities right under our nose when we see them. So for me, coaching is the greatest gift because one, you get to learn all the skills, tools and techniques that will make you better at your existing career. You can absolutely do it part-time alongside an existing career. I'm living, breathing proof of that. And at some point you might want to step into it full-time, which is a gift, which is less of a scary step because you've already experimented with what works and what doesn't and some of the economics. And equally, while you're in your existing career, you can double back into that as a coach. Win, win, win. All right, well, hopefully you've enjoyed that episode on part-time, full-time coaching, the difference and all the bits in between. Don't forget to follow along. If you enjoy this podcast, please do share it far and wide. And if you do want to come and train with me at any point to either become an accredited coach, or if you're an accredited coach and you want to learn more about business and marketing, go to coachbusiness.school. I shall see you soon. Keep coaching. Your coach, Andy.